THG. Fyrst þegar við ætlum að halda upp á 30 ára afmæli fyrirtækisins, þá var náttúrulega hugmyndin að bjóða til veislu og halda bara partí. Það var svona upprunalega hugmyndin. En eftir nánari skoðun, þá datt okkur í hug að halda þennan viðburð, bjóða einhverjum heimsfrægum arkitektum til landsins og halda fyrirlestur og líka opna umræðu arkitektúr og hönnun fyrir almenning. Með því finnst okkur við vera að geta gefið aðeins tilbaka en ekki síður að efla umræðu arkitektúr og okkar fag almennt. Það er að minnsta kosti þá komið tími til þess að eiga jákvæða umræðu arkitektúr, skipulag og hönnun á Íslandi. Now I will switch to English, of course. Dear guests, Lyndon Neri and Rossana Hu, welcome to Iceland. We are lucky to have you here with us today. And you will tell us about your work and thoughts on architecture, so we feel very lucky. I'm certain that you will enjoy our country, as you will have some extra days to travel around and see the sights. So, our schedule is pretty simple. First one on stage is Massimo. He's going to introduce to us our guests. He's the dean of our architecture school. Then we're going to have our main event, the lecture from Neri and Hu. After that, we will have maybe 20-30 minute panel discussion, a Q&A, which will be run by Sahar, the director of the master program. And after the lecture, we will also invite everyone for drinks and food by the canteen next door. So please feel welcome to join us there. Lastly, I would like to thank everyone that helped us to plan and prepare for this event. LHI, Massimo, Sahar and Oli, thank you for hosting this event for us. I want to thank the Architectural Association as well, Sigga, Björg and Helga Guðrún, and all the other people that helped us to make this day possible. So, without further ado, Massimo, welcome. Thank you.
Dear guests, faculty, students, dear distinguished visiting lecturers, Lyndon Neri, Rossana Hu, welcome. I also want to start saying thank you to our benefactors, THG Architects, who came to us many months ago with a very incredibly generous offer, which is the one to celebrate 30 years of their activities by donating and giving this lecture as a gift to the community. So congratulations to you for your 30 years of activities, for your generosity, and I really ask please everyone join me to say thank you. So my name is, I still need to read what my name is. It says it's Massimo Santanicchia. I am a professor in architecture and dean of the School of Architecture at the Iceland University of the Arts. So 12 years ago I was actually in Shanghai and I was working in the Bund area of Shanghai and I encountered a building that is called Waterhouse. And it really stuck, this building, in me. I thought it was a marvelous dialogue that the building created with its own past. A dialogue that was engaging, it was accurate, it was detailed, precise, ironic, poetic, simple, rough, sublime, innovative, and brutally unapologetic. This dialogue was created by Neri and Hu. So Neri and Hu Design and Research Office was founded in 2006 by partner Lyndon Neri and Rossana Hu as an interdisciplinary architectural design practice based in Shanghai. The office is composed of a multicultural staff who speak more than 30 different languages, so your webpage reports. And the diversity of the team reinforces a core vision for the practice that to respond to global worldview incorporating overlapping design discipline for a new paradigm in architecture. Neri and Hu are a couple in life and work with international roots. Neri was born in the Philippines and raised also in the United States, and Hu, originally from Taiwan, was educated in the United States. Together they have developed a design language that is both work-related and place-based. Their projects, whether they be cultural institutions, interiors, exhibition or objects, remind us that architecture is not merely about space, but about life. About people, memory, time, identity, hope, purpose, meaning and integrity. Neri and Hu, through your work, you have helped us seeing that good design is when form reflects life and further encourages it in all its dimensions. Good architecture is about writing stories with its site, its history, its culture, its physical and emotional conditions. Iceland is a land of stories, of legends, of sagas, of relentless wind, as you have experienced, extreme light conditions, and yet so much of what we build is unresponsive to these elements. So in inviting you here, we hope to explore together what it means to write stories and poetry through architecture, designing new stories with care, in dialogue to our landscape and history, and in dialogue to those old stories that have been fundamental in building this proud nation. To our students, I want to say this is a rare opportunity for you to dialogue with Rossana and Lyndon. So I encourage you to listen carefully and to ask questions and to test the boundaries of what architecture can do. Lyndon and Rossana, your presence among us is a gift. We look forward to your insight, your critique, your inspiration, and your stories. So on behalf of the Iceland University of the Arts, and all of whom I worked to make this moment happening, of course, THG, the Architects Association of Iceland, welcome Rossana and Lyndon. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Very good. Okay. Let me see. Let me just try to orient myself. I know I'm in Iceland. Sometimes I'm traveling like mad. Sometimes I don't know. Let me see. So in case you do not know yet, this is the name of our practice called Neri and Hu Design Research Office. I am Lyndon Neri. My partner here is Rossana Hu. Today we were supposed to, or at least the flyers and the poster talks about the idea of total design. But after landing in Iceland, we decided we were going to change the topic. We realized there is something more interesting, and in fact, total design will be given 3 days later in Serralves Museum in Porto, in case you're interested. So today we're going to talk about from here to there. But before we go there, I want to thank the kind introduction. Obviously, we want to thank THG Arkitekta, Freyr, Paolo, and Haldor for the kind gift to allow us to not just give this lecture, but actually enjoy the sauna and spa in the hotel that they designed. Of course, we want to thank the Architectural Association, Siga, Björg, and Helga. I might have bastardized your name. The email that came my way started by saying, you could stay here for a week, it will be an amazing country. That really was captivating because it's not just two days of come and go. And of course, it goes without saying that the Iceland University of the Arts, Sahar, Oli, thank you for the computer made-up, and of course, the ebullient Massimo. He asked me, are you going to show Waterhouse at the end of the thing? Thank goodness I added it last night in order for him to be happy. So I know the title of the talk tonight might be strange to you from here to there, but in many ways it's another way to describe what we call the in-between. The liminal space, or what is commonly called threshold in architecture. From here to there is also our constant search for meaning and purpose, our search of belonging, our search for home. Home means different things to different people. It also means different things to the same person at different stages of his or her life. Thresholds are important, and why are they important? Because we, as humanity, constantly traverse between locations, not just in personal travels, but early on, my partner Rossana and I went to the US for our studies from different parts of Asia. Me from the Philippines, her from Taiwan, both of us going to Chinese schools. So in many ways, we didn't really speak English, we only spoke Chinese. We used to travel to Shanghai from the US when we graduated to work on projects, but after moving and establishing our practice in Shanghai, where Rossana's father is from, we now reverse that direction and travel to other parts of Asia, to Europe, the Middle East, Africa, back to the Americas, to teach and work, and now of all places, Iceland. In many ways, your country is also uniquely positioned on the mid-Atlantic range, a rift where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates are pulling apart. Although this is tectonic, if Trump has his way politically, he might also consider not just Greenland, but Iceland part of the US. That would be scary. This means a part of your country is on the North American plate, another part is on the Eurasian plate. Perhaps an in-between country. This country considered in-between, perhaps it's a threshold between Europe to other parts of the world. The notion of traversing between space and time in practice has long been embedded in our practice. 2 years ago, our exhibition in Berlin in the Edith Gallery showed 17 years of work in progress. The lecture today will examine a series of contemporary issues. I know yesterday, as of last night, late at night, there were 4 messages in my Instagram message asking me to do this project, but I'm not going to do it, so my apologies if you're in this room, because we only have time limitation, I'm going to only show 8 projects. But in many ways, these various global contexts that we deal with, we want to aim and shed light on how the firm grounds its work. The image here shows an extension of the Mural Museum, which originally was a Western museum, a hotel, that we did when we started our practice. And 2 years ago, the same client asked us to add an insertion to a museum that actually becomes the entry of this particular museum. So in many ways, it shows that our work not only crossed between location, cultures, but also between typologies. While maintaining an intellectual inquiry into adaptive reuse, this is one of our first houses we did when we started off our practice, the role of history, the reimagined spatial legibility associated with voyeurism, and of course the role of collective memory, reflective nostalgia, fragments, and in many ways, the idea of rainophilia. This is a project, a Suzhou tea house, again, close to my hometown in China. And this is the Domus magazine cover, where our project was there. Jean Nouvel was the creative director at that time, and asked this very serious question in that, are we entitled to modify the past? In some of our projects, which are under construction right now, ideas of tectonics and the use of poche is very much prevalent. This is a school outside of Shanghai, in an island called Tongmingdao that is now under construction. Or perhaps a search for connection back to the vernacular, a project in what we call the ceramic capital of China, Jingdezhen, where the public square is in between 2 hotels. The in-between could simply be the new and the old. This is a Blue Bottle Cafe in Shanghai. But one could argue that the more obvious divide perhaps deals with the past and the future, east and west, Or perhaps like this chapel that we are working on right now, the divide might be about interior and exterior, about the artifice and about the landscape. Or perhaps like this factory, which we are also working on, deals with the idea of global and local, urban and rural. We find that identity is no longer easy to define. Are we defined by our passports, the color of our skin, the accent with which we speak, or the topping we put on our pizza? Why do I say this? This is a recent project we completed in Paris. A small Italian pizza restaurant owned by a Parisian. The head chef is an amazing Japanese who's very good in doing pizza. And to confuse everything, they decided to hire a Chinese practice. Everything is in between. There's no clarity, but I guarantee if you're in Paris, the place is an amazing restaurant. We cross divides like never before. As people and as designers, threshold with different variation. This is a school project that we are working on. Often crossing divides between tradition, institution, society, or even our own profession. Our profession has determined in many ways what we should do, but are we ready to comply to those? Divides between the city and the periphery, tradition and new vernacular. But other, more nuanced divides we feel have over the years become themes that helps us analyze our own projects. And in fact, today we will be organizing our talk using those themes and dualities, parents and description to articulate many of our projects. In fact, we're focusing on 8 projects in China, and I know a lot of you are very curious about our international work, so at the end of the lecture, we're going to just show you a snippet of a lot of our international work under construction. We're not going to describe it, just to give you guys that satisfaction from all the requests. But in many ways, this is that Shanghai Theater project we did about 7 years ago, where that divide, where that in-between is not so clear, where we start to invade the threshold of the public realm and the public street. And here, the entry that is formalized, supposed to be interior, yet it's still part of the exterior. By expanding to the sidewalk, into the theater proper, we start to blur and mitigate what truly is threshold. We touched on the subject with our installation at the Venice Biennale 2 years ago. 2 years ago, actually, addressing the theme liminality. Finding an architectural articulation to the quality of ambiguity and disorientation between the threshold of old and new, outside and inside, urban and rural, refinement and roughness. As literary critic Terence Huck once quoted, the true nature of things may be said to lie not in things themselves, but in the relationship which we construct and then perceive between them. As a practice, this place we call home now, Shanghai, or China to be specific, sets the stage for our design experience. This is also the title of our second monograph, Threshold Space, Time and Practice. This happens to also be the entry of the office, and it became the cover of our new monograph published last year.
So before we move on to describe our projects, we want to spend some time to share with you the context of where we work, where we live, and also some of the concepts that have that we've spent a lot of time thinking about when working on these projects over the past, I would say, 15 to 18 years. This is an image by photographer Wang Jingsong, and it's made from photos found in a period of mass demolition in China. And it's about the same time that when we first went to Shanghai in about 2003. This word that you see, it's the same word in all the images here. It's a word you would call chai, meaning to demolish or to remove. And it's written on buildings. During that time, when you walk down the street in Shanghai or in most major cities, you can see entire blocks that is about to be demolished, and on doors and windows and walls, they write that word. I think it's a code for demolition workers to know which one to demolish. And so it's just, something that you would see so much of in a city like Shanghai that you almost don't think about the word demolition anymore. And then after a few years, as China prepared for the 2008 Olympics, the whole country got caught up in a massive building boom. You start to see images like this. So China was under this world architecture stage. Developers, they competed to outdo each other with eye-catching designs, but these forms often had nothing to do with their actual surroundings. And so very early in our practice, we took on many adaptive reuse projects that made us wrestle with the questions of history, heritage, and culture. We juxtaposed old and new, reinterpreted local building types, and we wanted to celebrate the ordinary, the everyday elements that we see and came to love in the town that we lived in. And this work feels even more urgent now with the climate crisis, with losing a lot of our kind of values and history. Adaptive reuse isn't just about design, but it's about cutting waste and saving embodied carbon and also building resilient futures. The context in China during our startup years was super speed urbanization. I think you probably read about it here on newspapers and see on TVs. And that kind of super speed urbanization created the fastest construction and development in human history. Believe it or not, from 1980 to 2023, China's urbanization increased dramatically from 19% in 1980 to 66% in 2023. And between 2000 and 2010, urban land expanded by 83%, and urban population grew 45%. And it involved, so that kind of growth involved moving approximately 450 to 500 million people from rural to urban areas between 2000 and 2023. It's just mind-boggling. And also, 1 out of 6 families in China have been evicted and relocated since early 1990s. When you build, you have to first demolish, and you will see some of the kind of social impact of what that had brought to some of the towns in the projects that we built. And as urbanization transformed cities and changed how people live day to day, we began to see new forms of urban leisure emerging, alongside some pretty dystopian and alienating social scenes like these. And on the rural side, China's vernacular villages built around Confucian family ideals as clusters of traditional homes were disappearing just as fast. The Ministry of Housing cataloged roughly about 9,000 historic villages based on their structures and intangible cultural heritage, and about 80% of them are rural, and some of them are shown here. Yet, despite this recognition, they are being abandoned at unprecedented rates, just like the buildings that are being demolished in cities. And another major issue, social and economic issue, is that able-bodied people leaving rural homes for opportunities in nearby cities. Each empty chair here represents an absent family member. This forces us to rethink about our role as architects and how do we treat the past as we move forward. These two extremes, they frame one question. On the urban side, Michael Wolff's photography captures what those kind of buildings and the kind of building frenzy produced. Anonymous cities stripped of personality. And on the other side, a typical Shanghai alleyway, just like where we live in Shanghai, we live in this threshold between tradition and modernity and watching both worlds collide. So how do we relate to what's disappearing? Svetlana Bohm, she describes 2 attitudes in The Future of Nostalgia. One is called, or she calls it restorative nostalgia. It tries to literally reconstruct the lost home, bring it back to exactly as it was, the past history, just like you would, say, in a town like Venice or Florence, where you keep historic buildings as is. But there's another way to think about nostalgia, and it's coined by her, called reflective nostalgia. It's a longing for home while you know that you may never arrive. And that's okay, because in that search of home, in that search for authentic history of the past, something innovative and creative happens. We will be showing 4 sets of projects, and each set within a conceptual frame. The first one is called Incision, and the first project is in a place called Nantou. We start in the south of China. In this place, it's part of a larger city called Shenzhen. And if you don't know Shenzhen, you probably know Hong Kong, and Shenzhen is right next to Hong Kong. It's a city that is known almost for most people as a city that is without history. But of course, we know every place has a history. And this place started off as a small fishing village. It remains very vibrant inside a modern metropolis. And some of the distinct characteristics were retained in this small kind of fishing village that it used to be. We maintain a lot of the narrow alleyways and dense housing, organic piazzas, and close-knit social networks. It's an 8-story existing building, and we were asked to transform it into an 11-room guest house. This was the existing building that we sort of inherited when we went to the site. And life here is so colorful that we wanted to reflect the mundane and the everyday and connect it back to the city's fabric. So rather than simply just mimicking the past or applying superficial material effects, we were more interested to unearth, kind of discover possibilities that are hidden behind the past. We asked ourselves, how can architecture reinvigorate a new sense of place? So by carefully stitching the building into the existing fabric, and first keeping the existing fabric or the existing facade untouched, then finding a delicate balance between engagement with the urban fabric and autonomy of the architecture form. This interplay between context and independence shapes a project's approach to adaptive reuse. As Stan Graham observed in Meta Clark's 1975 work, Conical Intersect, the methodical building cuts serve dual purposes. And I'm quoting him. He says, with the aid of the periscopic viewers could find look into the interior of the Meta Clark building as a sculpture, but also through the conical borings out onto those buildings that are in the city that embodies past and present eras of Paris. And we gain new vertical access where we recut openings into the building massing, allowing incisions to open up a new public realm. These cuts, you can see it kind of like in the middle, they change the pattern of movement and use of the building. And the facade strategy was simply using a layer of cladding, new layers of cladding like sheer screens to kind of dress up the existing fabric and facade. Old and new are juxtaposed throughout the building, as you can see here, to celebrate ruins. A view looking down the stairwell, where the stair cuts kind of, and also acts like a hinge, simultaneously connecting and dividing spaces. They reveal the unresolved tensions in the site's history. There are 9 different rooms in this guest house, and just kind of clicking through some of the interior spaces. The staircase that you saw a while ago that I described as the cut, they take you up to this rooftop, a public terrace, where you see the rich lives of other buildings' rooftops. This is the public entrance opening to a public plaza. And the metallic monolith on the roof, kind of like that hat on the roof, It acts like a visual marker, connecting us to the skyline. The project's success lies in its ability to maybe fulfill both roles, engaging with the community while exploring its own formal possibilities. Through the use of dialectical imagery, the project not only reflects the tension of mass production and development, but also critiques the socio-political forces that shapes it. So showing a quick film, you'll see this cut here on the streets, and it's been referenced to become the staircase in our building. See the life down in the alleyways, it's vibrant, and people have a tendency to kind of, live on the streets, making the street part of the city. And so that's the staircase in the building. New metal skin makes new layers of facade, moments of detailed encounters with material and texture, and they magnify the contrast and the tension of old and new. So when you turn the corner, you can sit on this seat made out of marble. Kind of inviting people who walk through or just pass by to interact with, maybe people who are neighbors who live right next door. And going up and down the stair is also kind of like experiencing the city. And when you go all the way up, you actually engage the skyline, the rooftops of other buildings. So the past and the present here are juxtaposed throughout the building to celebrate ruins, not just as symbols, but saying that ruins can take on a different logic, one that is not romantic, not melancholic, but a form of toleration of disharmony. And that's a quote by Rossana Hu. All the different rooms here are designed separately so that they're not, repeated rooms like you would in a usual hotel. And you see that these alleyways are really very narrow, and kind of that narrowness and the tension behind the massing and the experience is kind of brought into the experience of moving throughout the building. The next project, so we were in the south, close to, if you know the map of China, we were in the south, close to Hong Kong. Now we're kind of going up, past Shanghai, a little north of Shanghai, in a place called Suzhou. So, and Suzhou is about an hour and a half drive from Shanghai. And this left drawing is an important contemporary painter, is by an important contemporary painter, Wu Guanzhong. His work is known to represent this region's kind of cultural aesthetic in blending traditional ink techniques with Western modernist approaches. We like it that he shows a particular kind of vernacular sublime that's very hard to describe with words. Characteristics of the white wall and the gray clay tiles found in this region called Jiangnan Water Town. And we kind of use that approach to address some of the cultural background and history of this town. And the approach to the chapel is important to note. It starts with a brick wall entry. And I'll just kind of quickly show, this is a section showing the side staircase. And it's really the staircase that stitched the buildings together. through moving up and down, just like that other project that I showed a while ago. And you would come to the mezzanine level. It hovers overhead to accommodate extra guests and include a catwalk that wraps around the chapel. From the back of the mezzanine, you would also go up here on top of the brick walls to gain a view of the whole village. And tectonically, the white volume is specially treated with 2 layers of exterior. The first one, the inner one, it's a simple concrete box, punctuated on all sides with scatter openings, and the outer layer is folded, is a folded and perforated metal skin. Together, the effect is contrasted in the day and also at night, which you will see here in this film. So the chapel is literally on the lakefront. This is the water from the lakefront. It's a serene and scenic part of Suzhou that is really very famous. Most people know it. And if you have been to Shanghai, it's famous for its crabs. And the crabs from this lake is particularly famous. The approach is through these brick walks. Where you see different heights of walls. And these walls, they kind of interweave with each other, creating a journey that kind of starts from a while ago, and they take you up to the building itself. And from that entry, you come to the main chapel, featuring a 12-meter-high, light-filled sanctuary. This is the mezzanine, and it's integrated into a wood louvred, sort of like a caged element that wraps around all 4 sides of the main hall. And you see through the different layers out towards the water. The attached staircase, it's an important feature. It allows visitors to roam up and down, seeing different views inside the chapel and also out to the exterior landscape. And here you see the lake. The white volume, it's a simple box punctuated on all 4 sides and acts like a veil that hides and reveals, showing different views, different lighting conditions during the day and also at night.
So the second set of ideas is dealing with the word present and absent. So the pairing of present and absence explore how the tensions situated at the threshold or in between boundaries generate different spatial construct. So if we were to borrow from Martin Heidegger's seminal text, Building, Dwelling, and Thinking, the boundary is not a point of termination. It doesn't stop there. In fact, it is a point where the beginning, or what he calls the presency, begins. So the first project we want to share with you within this context of this duality is called The Void, a running Art Center. Now we're going up north, northeast of Beijing in China. So here you have a guided tour of all of China today, all for free. It is about 3 hours east of Beijing by car, and when I got a call, I didn't even ask my client where my site was, because I knew that this developer, this particular area in Qinghuangdao, have hired many of our friends that do very good architecture. And many of you might be familiar with some of the work by Vector to the left, which is a lonely chapel, the library, and then the chapel, and then this is open architecture. So without even questioning what the program was, I immediately said, sure, we will do it. Thinking to myself that this idea of creating something beautiful in a beautiful setting overlooking the water would be absolutely what we needed. I was completely wrong. Because when I went, we found out very quickly that we were in this Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean village. I call it a fake Mediterranean village. It's neither Spanish nor Italian, since there's a number of Italians here. I'm not even so sure if this is Scandinavian, but as far as he's concerned, this was his Mediterranean village. He's like, I gave you the best. You're gonna create a city museum, a center in which this rock, this idea of a cultural rock will be manifested. So what did we do? When confronted with the idea that you don't have the beautiful landscape, you don't have the sky, you don't have the water, what we did was we decided to go inward, to be introverted. In many ways, that sense of absence became our very strength. Even though he was a visionary developer and he believes in developing community outside of major city, he didn't even understand why we were so disturbed by this. But instead of rejecting this commission, we took this opportunity to use this idea of the pre-given geometry of the sightline and create a whole structure within. These are some of the sketches that were developed during the beginning of the conversation by creating this walkway that surrounds around this gallery. And instead of looking at a view, we decided to have an opening to ourselves. It was a straightforward brief, and so we decided to carve a middle courtyard. In many ways, one could call it a negative space, a sense of absence, but by doing this, it frames the sky. And down below, it's filled with water when no one is using, and of course it's drained when there are activities. The Art Center asserts its monumentality by having precast terracotta, precast concrete, and by the time it goes up with the budget getting lower, it became GFRG, what they call GFRG, right? You couldn't tell if you were in that space, but it became quite interesting to understand that this idea of absence, this idea of a negativity became the very present in this particular project. So this atrium, that void that creates the architectural presence. So the Art Center looks inwards towards this void to connect with the only nature it has access to. This monumental piece of architecture, conceived as a rock based on the brief, became the formidable presence that it requires. Within this thick massing of the building volume is a series of interlocking spaces. The visitor can meander freely within, where a journey is choreographed with directed views, both inward and outward. The courtyard that I just showed you became that physical vessel that indexes the ephemeral elements of the site. When it rains, you feel it. When it's snowing, you feel the chill. You don't really need to open the door. There's a natural ventilation. for a Scandinavian project. So the second project for this pairing is a competition we won 6 years ago. And Rossana likes to joke about this because it was 8 firms, eventually it became 3 firms. It was by Pernod Ricard, the French spirit company, decided to do a Chinese whiskey distillery, a Chinese whiskey brand. Shortlisted 8 Chinese practices, came down to 3. Of the 3, one was the Pritzker Prize winner, Bill Jiaquin, last year. Was it last year or this year? Last year. So Rossana often joked that I think they're regretting now that they picked us as the winner of this project. But in many ways, this became very important for us as a practice, because even though it was enticing, we realized that the distillery required massive industrial, spatial construct to make whiskey. 2-3 stories. And yet we realized that the landscape that we inherited was so sacred. If you look at the model here and look at to the left is a picture, a bird's eye view of the site. You could see the beautiful water that roams around this little mound. And the right is our model. And in many ways, the impulse from the very beginning throughout the design process was a sense of humility, a sense of disappearing. And very difficult because obviously the whiskey manufacturing kind of plant required 3 stories. So we embedded with the lowest or the valley point of the site. But why is it important for us to be extremely quiet? In fact, the two other schemes were extremely loud, and we were apparently told that we were very different. It became very important to us that the design needed to be contextual, because we realized that this mountain that surrounds this site was a sacred one, the iconic image of Umesan. It has remained one of the deepest spiritual symbols for Chinese Buddhism. Not just spiritual Buddhism, but also for the literati, writers, thinkers, painters. To unlock their creativity, oftentimes they would walk days on end without knowing their destination, to completely understand and have a sense of epiphany of what needs to be, what life needs to be. So with that in mind, we said to ourselves, if the mountain, if Umesan was the presence, the landscape is the presence, the building needs to disappear. That was a risky proposition on our part, because the brief wanted a Scottish symbol, a symbolic gesture that we have arrived, as Pernod Ricard, we have arrived and planted our flag in the Chinese soil. Yes, we're going to create a Chinese whiskey distillery, but we debated for a long time. In fact, the biggest mound, which is the tasting center, is that, which is only a story and a half. And we embedded the tasting center so that when we're actually in this particular space, the presence of the mountain beyond Umesan became so powerful that our primitive geometric appearing in this particular space seems tiny in comparison. Also, the idea of the circle within the square, the idea of primitive parochial notion of architecture, bringing in that sense of basic necessity within the shape became very important to us. Some of the images, again, the beautiful mountain. Let me just show you. This is underneath the tasting center, where that mound that you saw, images of it. This is the distillery itself. You can imagine huge 3-story structure. By putting it in the lowest part of the site, or considered the valley, it now appeared rather domestic. And this was the space. In fact, the end of it is the restaurant, and even in the restaurant there is a framing, and within the framing you actually see the mountain. So even within the courtyards, going in underneath the creek, you actually see the building framing the mountain itself. So these are just some of the images. Various artists were employed throughout the project, so I'm gonna make sure I don't have the 8-minute film for you. No, that's the 8 minutes, so I'm gonna give you 8 minutes. So the problem of lacking contracts, i.e. architectural contracts, opposite of Aranya, made us rely simply on the site itself. In a purist sense, we decided that perhaps some of the most basic primitive form is enough. Surrounded on 3 sides by the winding creek and with a direct vista to the peak of Omei, the mountain, the topography of the land gradually steps with agricultural terraces. Some are dramatic and breathtaking, with steep rock cliff facing the water's edge. That was too short. In fact, I was about to describe it a little bit more. The reason why we also start using film as a way to describe a lot of our work is precisely knowing that many of you don't have the opportunity to come to China. And architecture to us is not just about beautiful drawings. I mean, I was trained by Rafael Maneo at Harvard, and it was important for him that in constantly emphasizing that drawing and pictures are not architecture. What is real architecture is the built work. And therefore, by creating films to showcase you at least, it's not perfect, but it gets you closer to our aspiration and what we're trying to do.
So we're now at the 3rd set of ideas. I don't know if you can tell, we're very, very tired. I feel like I'm speaking slower and slower.
Sometimes that's a good thing.
So contain, disperse, and I think it's good to know here that these ideas are not meant to set against each other. It's not about one or the other. That the first project is about contain, the second project is about disperse, but is that both projects they utilize these concepts of containment and dispersion for you to understand how we arrived at the scheme. So this is what the site looked like when we first inherited from the project. It's in a place that is 3 hours train ride from Shanghai, and it's a scenic and ancient city of Yangzhou next to the slender West Lake. And the program was to design a 20-room wellness retreat. It's not very big in area, but in the site, that's also not very big, but I think we needed to reuse a lot of the buildings that were there and also reuse the site as well. We first walked around the city and visited a nearby relic, an important garden called Geyuan, and we studied some of the vernacular conditions there, and I will show you some of those that became very important inspirations for us. One of them is this crucial reference. It's a private garden that is built by a salt merchant, like other classical Chinese gardens. Geyuan embodied this Taoist ideal of being one with nature, even though within kind of that philosophy and concept, I think there are a lot of things that were very ironic, and I will point them out and show you. As you know, Chinese garden design is deeply significant to its tradition and culture. Much of the high cultures in China stemmed from poetry and art that's linked to garden design and practice in gardens. So gardens, they represent this microcosm of universe, the creator's worldview in an enclosed and idealized realm. There's this conscious separation in this particular place between the residential cluster and the body of the garden here, like most traditional gardens in Jiangnan. The formation is a traditional nice square grid, and the organization is such that the left wings are for residential dwelling, the middle wings are for visitors and larger gatherings, and the right wings are for servants and support quarters. There are 2 prominent lanes you can see in the plan that I just showed, and the 2 prominent lanes are in the center. They run north and south. And they are the fire lanes, and these are the firing lanes. They are dramatic in view, and they became a conceptual feature for the project. And you will see how some of the vistas that we created in the project came from these inspirations. We extracted other elements, experiences from the vernacular elements that we found, like this release of looking up towards the sky from within the courtyard and applied to a few of the spaces in the project. So back to the site, the design brief called for the adopting some of the footprints of the previously demolished buildings here. And this was the existing site plan that we inherited. And I will just kind of quickly go through these images and I think move quickly to the film. So you always kind of go back to these covered walkways. This is the outdoor theater and view from above the theater. Some public spaces like the dining halls, sunken conversation pit, one of the semi-private courtyards from the bedroom suite. And it's important to note that we used a lot of reused bricks from demolition sites. So we started with this aerial view where you see a clear orthogonal orientation. And you'll see that the gridded walkways later that happen everywhere are inspired by the fire lanes that I showed you a while ago. They work to kind of organize the different zones within this wellness center. They also help to guide circulation. They define and wrap the functional spaces within. And the adjacent ponds and waterways are borrowed to make up the landscape, the overall landscape. Nearly the entire project is composed of recycled bricks. And these bricks, they were collected from nearby villages. Nearby villages often have sites that are demolished, and so they collect different bricks from different villages, brought them here, and through kind of reuse of that material, I think we're able to provide a new life to these bricks that were demolished elsewhere. So dispersion in this project applies to the spatial organization, since all of the courtyards are scattered within the matrix of the walled bricks. These functional spaces are dispersed, right? Dispersed throughout, but also at the same time contained. And in that way, they create a new landscape approach where the visitors, they experience unfolding views as they walk throughout the site. And Lyndon talked about this idea of the threshold in between, going from here to there. In that sense, I think in this project, the thresholds are less defined because I think you cannot really see the boundaries that clearly. They blur the lines between inside and outside, what's public, what's private, and also what's old and new. And also they form a kind of new garden, one that sort of defies the garden heritage. In the garden heritage that I showed you in a more traditional garden, in revealing kind of the paradox of the artificial organic, blurring the zones between nature and man-made. Because what I didn't explain a while ago is that kind of that tradition of the garden making, even though they were attempting to recreate nature, but in fact everything in Chinese garden are man-made, including the mountains and the ponds. Very rarely are they natural. So there exists kind of this shift of, what is real and what is not real, kind of creating that ideology of a new world. And so in a way, we also saw this as a chance for us to reinvent a new vernacular. And now we move to the north. This is in Beijing, in the city of Beijing. And we were called to convert an old cotton factory to a gallery and a headquarters for a pastry brand. The design is inspired in part by the client's main product, traditional pastries, often formed in a decorative mold. And that's what you see here. The mold is made out of wood. It's a notion that a container may form and hold the shape of its contents within. And I think that's really interesting as an architectural kind of analogy. Then through masking and revealing, creating an interesting and interesting spatial juxtaposition between the old and the new. A train track used to run through the site, delivering raw materials. The site we inherited looked like this. It was just a shell of an existing warehouse, section photo of the existing condition. And we started by identifying how we can insert this new object within. The gray shadings here are support spaces. And they are also marked by the use of new cast concrete. A quick section details. This is the entry, and I think we will also move to the fill. In the film, you will see that the building is left almost intact, as is, except this entry is encased in new layers of glass and metal. You'll see a lot of concrete here. The concrete often is molded into the existing brick walls. They form different new things, new rooms, new doorways, new walls, new window frames, and also ceiling cuts. This is looking down at the pastry gallery. It's a new attempt to display traditional pastry made in traditional ways in a contemporary and almost kind of minimalist setting. So these are kind of the new formed concrete, and then you'll see on the left side the brick, the existing brick. It's often pulled back, forming this backdrop for the newly formed concrete spaces, either as like an office here or as a corridor, or like this training rooms. Also, they create this double-story atrium to the left of the space, revealing in a sectional way how the new functions, they work with the existing brick envelope. A rooftop cut into the concrete for sunlight and also fresh air. And while the concrete itself operates like a surface, a new surface covering, its main objective is not just to conceal or to obscure, but rather to reveal existing structures' imperfections. And in a way, all this new concrete, they complete the wall within. Functionally, its true role is one of revealing. It unveils the existing wall's composition and kind of showing the texture of its construction, but also working very well with kind of inscribing its own history onto the brick.
Okay, we're coming to the end. So the last set of projects is under preserved and demolition. So in many ways, this pairing seems diametrically opposite. Yet, but if we have to understand this last duality, preserve and demolish, we turn to the term creative destruction. a theory originated by economist Joseph Schumpeter, who has used to describe the condition of modern Chinese cities where demolition operates alongside rapid development. Obviously, that balance becomes very important. You can't demolish too many things, and you can't preserve things that are not significant. Where is this balance? And this is where it became quite interesting for us as a young practice. So Massimo talked about 12 years ago when he visited this particular project. This is the project I'm about to show. This almost missed the cut, but thank goodness last night I had dinner with Massimo. And he made sure, through hinting the fact that he was here, that I have to, out of respect, in this his particular university, that I have to show. So in our adaptive reuse project, the ruin operates as the muse to elicit visceral experience, to connect to the past. However, the basis for adaptive reuse are actually not romantic relics from the past itself. Right? We don't often romanticize it. In fact, often they are useless leftover in the city. The muse in question does not always follow a conventional set of aesthetics or value designation. In fact, like this first project, the water house, this became very important as a young practice about 20 years ago, 18 to be exact, when we started the project, when we got a call to do a project on the Bund. For those of you that do not know, there are only 33 buildings on the Bund. 33 buildings. So you can imagine when we got a call, I should not say we because it was me, and I'm more the egotistical of the partnership. Rossana always questions everything. She doesn't trust in all the client's requests. I always believe in the best possible thing. So when this project was presented to us, I said, of course, 33 buildings. I'm asked to design one of 33 buildings. Definitely, what I missed out on was the fact that this was not on the Bund, but south of the Bund, right? It turned out to be this warehouse, not the historical, beautiful, big, magnificent European classical type of architecture, but rather this concrete shack of a building. So when the client asked us, well, you're free to demolish this building, you have to remember we were young, we only had interiors project at that time. Naturally, our first impression was no problem. But the second request was even more glaring. The two clients, one from Singapore and one from Shanghai, proceeded to say, well, we want you to demolish it, and we want you to build a brick building that looks like Mayfair, London. But I know that they are Chinese, and if they're Chinese, they are cheap. So the brick can't be this thick, it will be brick slips. And I knew this going on, so we convened for a few days, and we said to ourselves, maybe this 3-story concrete is not bad after all. And we start asking ourselves, what is this about this project? In fact, we start delving into this, what was supposedly a Japanese gangster warehouse where opiums, drugs, den for dealers were happening. Now that history is not so good, but we forget describing that to them. So from the earliest onset of this project, we were taken by the visual cue. But at the same time, as much as we were inspired, we were also scared by the fake bricks that were imposed upon us. So we went back with sketches and we said, if we were to preserve this building, it will save you a lot of money. And of course, with Chinese developers, when you say savings, they don't really care what architecture is. We start working and they proceed to say, go ahead and build this building. So as we sketch away, in fact, it was only 3 stories, that 4th story, because we wanted to do architecture so bad, I convinced the client's mother, who happened to be in one of the meetings, that if you have that top, the value of this project will go up double, and you will have an amazing view of the Bund. Of course, I lied. I didn't know what I was talking about. So we managed to convince the client that this was the not only cheaper alternative, but it will give this hotel the presence it's needed. Naturally, The concept behind a renovation, as clearly states here, rests on a clear contrast of what was before there, the patina of the old, and the refreshing idea of the corten steel, which represent the new. The main entrance here takes you to an interior lobby. And I know many of you probably have heard this in my lecture through TikTok or YouTube, but this I cannot help, but in this particular lobby, I remember during the opening, my parents came. When they entered this lobby, they both started laughing. My mom asked the question, my son, 2 questions I'm going to ask you, is this project complete? I said, it is already complete. This is the inauguration of this hotel. Second question, did the client pay you in full? I said, absolutely. So my mother said, you're either a genius or your client is a fool. You have to remember in architecture, it's not just the client you have to impress, it's also your parents, and specifically your mother, that you need to convince. This was the state in which we started our practice. But you can kind of tell the blurring of the interior and the exterior became very important to us. This visual connection of unexpected spaces became the driving force, that element of surprise for us. It was important for us that people come in, that it's not about the tourist gaze, but more a traveler. What's the difference? A tourist comes to a city and have a checklist of things that they need to go without really understanding the essence of the city. We believe, just like The Sheltering Sky, the movie, if you're following my train of thought, that the idea of a traveler, the idea that a traveler wants to understand the essence of the city by having this vertical relationship, building construct in its typology, we're bringing the Lane House of Shanghai into this particular hotel. A traveler, for instance, a tourist, for instance, would come to Iceland, the first thing or Reykjavik, and want to go see the Blue Lagoon or the Sky Lagoon, which we did. But it's not really truly Iceland or Reykjavik, I'm not so sure. Although it was an amazing experience, I have to say. Recycled wood from the rooftop were then taken in. Partly, we just absolutely have no idea. We kept all the openings, some of them new openings, and you could kind of see pourings and relationship, voyeuristic gaze. In fact, rooms like this, that's not a mirror. You can look at the rooms on the other side. This is a perfect room for parents who are control freaks so that they want to know exactly what their kids are doing. There's a slit underneath that looks down into the restaurants. Kids from the other room looking down at you. Different room types. We were stupid then. There were 15 rooms. We designed every single one of the rooms. Now we're smarter. We asked the question, how many types of room do you need? So these are all the different rooms. Obviously, the dialogue between the ground, the landscape, the interior and exterior was very important to us. And that is the lobby with the cheapest room looking down into the concierge. So this is that ruin which operates as the muse to elicit visceral experiences. To connect the city to its past. It's not so much about saving any significant history, but just that a useless remnant could be somewhat preserved and turn useful. This is the main entry door. After entering, you arrive at the lobby in this 19-room boutique hotel. Calvino wrote in Invisible Cities, arriving at each new city, the traveler finds again a past of his that he did not know he had. The foreignness of what you no longer are or no longer possess lies in wait for you in foreign, unpossessed places. The architectural concept behind this renovation, as I have described, clearly rests on the idea of what belongs to the past and what is new from our vantage point. The blurring of the interior and exterior, blending the public and the private realms, creating a disorienting and refreshing journey becomes part of that traveler's ethos. Each of the 19 rooms are entirely unique in size, layout, and the view it offers. The building sits on that Wangpu River, which you will see, as this guest stands up to look at that river. So that the added fourth and roof level that I convinced the mother of this honor are made in Corten steel, and you do see this amazing view. A thriving, lively river that is truly part of the city. Echoing the industrial ships, we use Corten steel to mimic a portion in the very genre of what the city stands for, which is a working class city. The rooftop, which you will see in a minute, overlooks the buðum high-rises and offers an herb garden for the restaurant below. The courtyard shelters are made from recycled wood found on the existing rooftop. We made visual connection of unexpected spaces not only to help one discover and explore, but also to provide more flexibility to the interior spaces. This may have compromised the room interiors to be smaller, but encouraged guests to wander out on their private rooms and promoted more chance meetings of people like you would in a city. You will find a lot of stairs, some stairs that lead to nowhere, as a way to remind guests the history of this building and also the city itself. If you find nothing there, don't worry, just leap up another flight of stairs. France, Kafka. The last, not the least of the project, the first project was a project we started, first architectural project about 14 years ago. And this is one of our latest projects that has a similar genre in materiality. It is a project in a city called Tallinn. In many ways, this is located in close proximity to university campuses and software parks, very similar to what is needed today. If you were to think of Tallinn, one would argue, just like Tianjin is a Silicon Valley of China. So the existing compound comprised 6 buildings dating back 40 years, which formerly served as offices, warehouse, and dormitories for a chemical research institute. Our design challenge was to find an architectural language that can encompass all these milieu of different types of buildings. In fact, some of them were added throughout the course of the 40 years. We looked at and researched some of the beautiful warehouse condition, but obviously realizing some of them have been added over the years. These are some of the sketches. We're going towards the 1-hour limit, so I'm going through this rather fast. You can kind of see all the aluminum. I know Iceland's very good with aluminum, but these are aluminum and plastic, some of them probably not from Iceland. So what we did was we start stripping them away to go back to the very core of what it is. So this adaptive reuse then became about that connectivity, transforming that compound into a destination to serve the local community. And as well, at the same time, the student population. The former dormitory has been converted into a mixed-use office. This became that landscape. They also ran out of money, so this actually initially was the foundation for another new building. But because of that, we'll have to wait for another 5 years, so we just filled it with rocks and became a garden. No one knows. Everyone thinks that was intentional, when in fact it was. There was this beautiful building right in the middle, but you have to invite me back for the next 5 years in order to show you what the next transition is. Some of the interior left is this, to give you sort of the marking. This was before opening. Right now it's completely thriving with restaurants. There's a library in there. There's co-working spaces, and I'm just going to quickly show you the film. The existing buildings arranged in U U-shaped configuration were introverted in nature and oriented towards a large empty parking lot. Our scheme completes the U-shaped figure by transforming it into an enclosed courtyard articulated by a new spatial system of walls, screens, and canopies. The tactile material palette is kept minimal and raw to complement the existing stucco facade and in many ways the existing structure. Corten steel is used as the main surface material given its relevance as an industrial material which weathers and changes, recording the progression of the interior design strategy and celebrating the tension between what was a chemical past and a plant to a new community center today. Many of our film projects are also special because actually our son worked on many of these films with us. He's not easy to work with, but given a father and a mother of our nature, the son is so idealistic. In fact, he often complains that our project is too commercial. So you can imagine. So it was very difficult just to have him show our building. Half the time, he doesn't show our building. He says, you talk about community, you talk about the past, why don't we just showcase the community and not your building? A very painful lesson from an architect, but he's right. There you go, him and his landscapes. So before I end this project, I kind of just want to show you a number of our projects abroad. For some of you, I know there's so many requests for us to show some of our projects outside of China, so I'm just going to quickly go through really fast. This is a project in Korea for a cosmetic brand called Sohwasu. This is a recently completed residential project in Taipei, Taiwan, which is kind of controversial because some of us might think it's China, but my partner here might not think so. Or a paint company in Korea, in Seoul, which is under construction right now. Recently, we're working with the Aman Group to create a project in Jeju Island. This is the first schematic we're just showing you. In fact, we're not showing it to everyone. So if you're filming this, hopefully we cut this because this is supposed to be private, but then I saw the camera and I started panicking. Some of the residential complex that we start working on in Korea, another part of Korea. This is a house that was recently completed in Singapore to commemorate a beloved mother who passed away from a serious accident in the US. So the idea of a Chinese traditional courtyard house, expressing Confucian ideal is shown in this particular house. A project under construction in Kuala Lumpur for a family of 4. A project in the Philippines of residential magnitude playing on the idea of the stone houses that commonly seen in the Philippines. A new project for Rolex headquarters. We do high-end too, not just all low-end. A Rolex headquarters. And to your surprise, all of that, they agreed to all this beautiful green brick. It's now under construction in Shanghai. To a tea plantation that we are working on outside of China. And to Europe, we're working on a project in Merano, which just got approval. In Italy, everything takes forever. In China, it takes 1 day. In Italy, it takes about 3 months just for approval, and another year to get our building license. By the time I've already given 10 other designs. This is a project in Berlin that is now under construction, which is very exciting, an old building that we're starting to incorporate a new insertion. This is an art center, quite confidential, in Utah for James Turrell. This is a recent competition we won in Jeddah, the Archaeological Museum. Quite exciting as a practice that had focused in China for the last 18 years and the last 4 or 5 years. Perhaps it was COVID that allowed us to say maybe perhaps we can start working globally. A project under construction, a competition we had won in South Africa, which is a residence and hotel for the Victoria Alfred Museum. For those of you that are product designers and wonder what we do and wanted me to give a lecture, I only have 2 slides. These are some of the pieces that we've done for a lot of the European brands. In fact, we work for 30-odd brands in Europe. And obviously a lot of Asian brands as well. Many of you are probably familiar. Many of you probably have bought this furniture in your house. For that, I thank you, because we get royalty out of that. For architects like us, we need every support from all of you. We also design lights from Artimidi to Biabizuno, to Stella Works, and again to Parachilna, and many of these brands that you're probably familiar with. We also do a lot of accessories. In fact, accessories we did before we had any work in architecture. In fact, the first 2 years, Rossana and I did that pot many times, that little teacup. Now it's really popular. A lot of people really liked it, but you know, there are times when we sit in the office not knowing where our next paycheck was going to come from. So we also do a lot of publication. When we started in the city, we realized that there was a lack of design dialogue and design ideology. And so as a couple, we decided that it was very important that the pedagogy and the thinking and the idea and new creative idea needs to come. And if China was just going to go at the speed in which it was going, that this design education was important. It was bilingual. We interview a lot of speakers, and this used to be every month we would have this publication, and it became four publication every year. It becomes twice every year. It became 1 a year, and now we're very busy. We became 1 every 3 years. So we did books. We call it Persistence of Vision, where we interview a lot of architects, famous, not famous, young and old. It's very interesting because this is already 20 years old. You can imagine when you don't have work, you start writing and reading. And obviously a lot of our monographs. This is now a very important publication. A lot of universities have this because this was a historical part of China that never manifested. I'm going to show you our office. In closing, I want to quote what Sarah Whiting, when she challenges the term adaptive reuse in the article she wrote on our projects in Domus magazine, offering another term, seamless synthesis, as her preference to mean something that unlocks intellectual horizon and other worlds, with particular magical precision. Quiet synthesis that is not meant to mask or distract, but neither is it meant to call attention to itself. Hopefully today, this afternoon, with the projects that we have shown you today, which cross divides between the past and the future, between typologies, between locations and culture, between traditional design practice and alternative programs and functions, we are able to bring forth new meanings to architecture by its ability to construct new relationships, and circling back and borrowing from Terence Hawke's words, perceive those that are between them. Perhaps it is in the marginal space from here to there, the pairing and the duality, that we find new meaning and purpose in architecture. Thank you for allowing us to share with you today a part of our journey. Sometimes a very lonely journey trying to convey clients, government, students, colleagues, and even my mother, the importance of finding purpose and meaning in what we do. In a country and in a city wherein speed and efficiency is the most important thing, it is very difficult for us to take that position trying to raise 3 kids and say, perhaps that's not enough. As a French philosopher once said, we do not aspire to be eternal beings, we only hope that things do not lose its meaning and purpose. And I certainly hope that mantra, as it is from our office, may also ring true to the profession we call and we love, be it architecture, product design, or interior design. Thank you very much.
journey with us and for reminding us that the architecture can be both deeply human and profoundly magical. So, and your reflection in culture, in rethinking the past, and also in between context is truly inspiring. On behalf of all of us, I would like to thank you for your generosity and for your insight. We have, I don't know now, do we have to continue on panel?
Yeah.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
Okay, so please, I'd like to...
You can finish it.
Yeah, okay. We're happy to continue then with a representative of THG Arkitekta, Paulo, and the Association of Icelandic Architects, and THG, Massimo. So I would like to invite Paulo to open the discussion with the first question, and then we move from there.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for being with us. I want to personally thank both of you for the amazing work that you have been carrying on for the past 18 years, and especially for sharing with us, your personal take on the projects. And I have to say that it's really inspiring. Not just for us professionals, but I guess also for the students and the future architects. I want just to say a few words on what are my impressions. I've been following your work during the years, and you have been of big inspiration. And if I have to think of something that I relate in all your actions, is what I would define in one word, which is poetry. Poetry, to me, means the ability also to slow and pause time. In the videos that most likely your son did, and in some of your photography, it's very, very clear your ability to stop time. And by doing that, I think it's an incredible exercise in such fast-growing world. So my question to Lyndon is how you are able to reconcile the fast reaction of the actual world. We are submerged by social media. We live in an abundance of images, while you are continuously asking the society to stop, be silent, all your videos are silent, and breathe the exercise of architecture.
The word, so it's interesting, the word in Chinese time means 时间, right? It's also very interesting, the word 间 also means, if you use another word, 空间, it means space. If you change the word 中间, it becomes middle. So all that deals with this idea of threshold. The question is, in that moment of traversing between from here to there, is how fast and how deep is this threshold? You know, Caruso St. John, when interviewed by, I believe, Aurelio was quite surprised because they thought Caruso St. John was all about floor plans. And they confide in that particular interview that they were very interested in not just elevation, but the thickness of that elevation. So why do I say that? It's because I think in the process of us tackling difficult issues in China, we use threshold as a way to prolong as much as we can some of the problems we're dealing with. Now, clients often that are not familiar with architecture thinks that the skin, the face, we call it yin, so it's very important. So a facade of a building becomes very important. By extending that facade and turning it into a threshold, a space, they cannot deny the importance of this particular exercise. And by pushing them to deal with this blurry space, it also allowed us to buy time. We did interior design because there were no interior designers, and no one wanted to hire us as architects. We did product design because everyone was copying everything. So we said, you can't copy, why don't we make pieces for you? And since there were no graphic designers, Rossana and I end up doing graphic design. In fact, there are times wherein no one knows how to build buildings. They just want to see renderings. They don't look at working drawings. So there we are on the side building with them. But what happened is, in the process of having all these in this blurry space, I could say, well, we can't finish our architecture yet because I'm developing the interior. Oh, we can't finish the interior yet because I'm working on your graphics. You understand? Now, the sad thing is, we got paid very little for all this, but to accumulate all of them, they became okay, right? So it's a matter of survival, but for us, it was a way to understand the importance of slowing down, because we saw from our very own eyes, little ice cream shop or pastry shop being demolished overnight. So my kids would run and go, I would like to go back there, and within 2 weeks, it's gone. So memory's been erased, and it got us so worried. In fact, we would go to Milan, and we have this badge called China, and everyone would go, please don't come in, because they're afraid that we're from China and we're going to copy. And that disturbed me greatly, because I know there was some truth to it. Even though I would look at the Italians, they're Italian, so I'm not going to attack the Scandinavian, I'm going to talk about the Italians. In fact, Italian copied Chinese furniture from the time of Ming Dynasty, but they're very good at branding, marketing, and they go, Mamma Mia, and all this other stuff. Right? So what we do was, in the process, that was very alarming for us, and we're like, if we don't slow down, if we're all about speed and efficiency, not only will we not remember the ice cream shop, we will remember our own history. And why, as diasporic Chinese, that became so important to us? Because growing up in the Philippines, growing up in Taiwan, growing up, especially for me, we were always told, one day you're going home. In fact, when I decided to go back to Shanghai or to China, my grandmother told me, held my hand, and says, I can go to sleep now, you're heading home. So that, finding home, finding meaning, to us became so important. And the need to have meaning and purpose forced us to slow everything down. And in the process, all our clients were forced to slow down and lose some money.
I have actually one question for Rossana. The question is, because both of you are renowned academics, through the academic work, do you use the academy as a lab where you, let's say, twist and speed up and stress test your ideas with the students, or you prefer to bring your practice ideas to the students?
It's a great question. It's a question that we continue to also discuss and answer ourselves. And I would say the simple answer is both. And it's really important to do both. We didn't start teaching immediately. We've always been dabbling within academics, serving as critics, giving lectures, but serious teaching was, I think, midway through our practice, I would say about 10 years ago. First in Hong Kong U, and then in the US, much more deeply and more regularly. And once you start teaching after practicing, you realize you're learning a lot, especially when you teach studio. You are learning with the students, and they bring fresh ideas that you can sometimes take and test out in your practice because you are working on real projects, whereas in studio these are kind of speculations that you come up with. And then vice versa, of course, the students are relying on you to give them real
light of that, it was also very important for us to make sure that aside from the more theoretical aspect of academia, that there's a practical component to it. So when people come to a Neri Hu studio, oftentimes they think, oh, we're going to immediately learn how to do it. Initially, they're shocked by kind of the theoretical pedagogy and positioning we're interested in. What is your idea? What is your thinking? But ultimately, at the end, we always have this exercise called object of encounter, where you either build a furniture, a light, a piece of hardware, and we tie you with a manufacturer in Italy or other parts of Europe and actually have them made if they can convince the brand. In fact, Via Mizuno sponsored one of these projects, and 3 of my Harvard students went to the final round of this competition of 1,000 entries. 3 went to the final 5, 1 got the contract. In fact, she was so overjoyed. She turned to us and she goes, should we split the royalty? I said, no, it's all yours, right? So under her name, how old was she at that time? 24, 25? You know, she designed a light and it's now part of the Viadism collection. That to us is not just about creating a fantasy of theoretical construct, but to actually have something tangible that they can relate and understand without compromising design.
Yes, I also have a question. It comes from my point of view, which is the one of a person who is committed to architectural education, also considering that this is the only school of architecture in Iceland. So most likely every single person who is an architect today in Iceland has had to deal with us, perhaps at the bachelor or master level. So, since you are also educators, my question to you is, what skills do you think are essential to be taught in a school of architecture, and how shall we teach those skills?
She's the chair. I'm just a professor, a critic. She's the chair.
Did you ask what skills we should be teaching?
Yes. Yes. You may interpret this word skill as you want.
It's such a good question, especially today. I think with AI, everyone is wondering, and I'm asked that question a lot by students and by journalists. I would say imagination. I still think our value as creators is what we think, and to imagine, whether it's through drawings or words or ideas, but it's really what you think, and that's the beginning of ideation, and it's your imagination turning to reality. Whether you use an AI along the way through the process of producing something, I think that's going to inevitably be part of reality. But our value is our imagination of what is to come, and that hopefully will not be replaced by AI too soon.
So actually, you know, it's interesting. I love literature. I love hard facts, history, but at the same time, I love fiction. Actually, I love fiction more than history. I would argue. Sometimes I would be in a plane, I would watch a movie, I would fall asleep, but then I could read fiction. Like sometimes I read it. My son would always say, "You read that already 3 times, Father. Why are you reading that again?" And I find it interesting. But I think it relates to what Rossana is saying in imagination. But I think 2 things is important: abstraction, the sense of abstraction. We're fortunate enough to be brought up in Asia, where in that sense of pragmatism and reality is set since we were kids. You know, knowing arithmetic, knowing your math, knowing your sciences. But it was in America that allowed us to have a conceptual kind of mindset. Bridging both becomes a very powerful phenomenon. Second, which I think is very important, is experience. As architects, I think it's experience to have spatial understanding of work, to be able to see the work and experience it, it pales in comparison to just looking at drawings. And that's why we try to have films to hopefully bring you closer to our world. But I think both, one is extreme imagination of abstraction, but the other grounded in real construct and grounding. So you're not just dreaming, but you're also blending.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for a very inspiring lecture. I want to ask something maybe more related to Iceland and the situation the architect community is in here. And it's related to the speed you were talking about and how to slow down. Because we are in a situation here where speed is more valued than quality, and how you would maybe advise us how to get developers to see project. How did you get the developers to see the project? How to slow things down, step back instead of the speed and the quick fixes, yeah.
So for me, and I'm sure Rossana will have a more intellectual bent to that question, but for me, and I'm someone who do not give up easily. I'm very resilient. When a client wants to change the design, I would say, let me think about it. It's a Chinese polite way of saying, I don't agree with you, I'm going to come back with a scheme. And I'm notoriously known in the architectural circle to delay a project. And I find very good excuses, you have to be very clever, but I'm also notorious for making a client fall in love with the scheme. And that, I believe, is also a responsibility. Sometimes I think as architects, as interior designers, as product designers, we are in such a high horse. We've been in school for 8, 10 years and thinking we have this dogmatic idea of what architecture, interior design, or product design. We forget to communicate. We speak like what we just did today and think everyone will understand. We get into this high horse, and when people don't understand, you turn to them, you're like, oh, you're so stupid. You understand? Of course they don't understand, right? Imagine a doctor trying to use medical speak to describe a particular surgery that's about to happen. You're probably going to panic because you don't understand exactly. But the way it's described to you, probably in very simple, humane ways, language can help mitigate that situation. So for me, I get them excited. In fact, after Iceland, we go to Porto, and then from Porto, I have to go back to Shanghai because I'm presenting to a client who, when I gave a lecture in Manila, asked me for breakfast the next day. And during breakfast, he said, I need to do a project with you before I die. I don't know what that project is. I could not sleep last night, and therefore I want to make sure I find a project. I have houses all over the world. I don't really need another house. I don't really need another office. Eventually, he decided to buy a plot, so we're doing a house for him, right? So it is about a language that they would understand and hopefully also fall in love. That passion, if it's real coming out of your heart, will be able to convince them to slow down. And it's hard. It takes time. But I think we've been quite notoriously resilient about it. Maybe you have a better answer.
I have two extreme answers, one very realistic and one very practical. And I think all three questions tonight are so good, it's going to make us think for a very long time. And the the first answer, the poetic one, has to do with the first question and relates to what Lyndon's talking about. I think showing a strong vision for your artistic ideal, an idea, and a project is important for the client to understand and to want to wait, I think. And I'm thinking about, you know, in music, I see that piano and I love it. It's the first time I'm on stage and there's a grand piano. I'm a huge music lover, and you know, when you're in a very moving concert, the time when you really are moved, often it's when there's a rest, when there's silence, because in the silence you hear the music that just got played. Without the rest, you know, if you learn music, without the rest, you don't, the rest defines the music that just happened. So I think that's when time becomes important. You know, without the time, the threshold, you don't understand the space. So that's a poetic answer. And the other very practical answer, I think, is that if you have better organization in a project, I actually think you can allow more time for creativity. Because, I mean, we're all probably architects here. If not architect, you're a student becoming an architect. You know, we have to work both sides of the brain, and I think we are one profession that really is very balanced to realize a very strong artistic dream. You have to be super organized to make it happen. And I think we can find a way wherein if you organize the span of a project from the conception of a developer wanting to, you know, get enough money to build, if they can, for example, communicate and select the architect much earlier and bring them on board much earlier, you have a lot more time to conceptualize a project. And then in the kind of scheme of the entire project, very often the delay is not because you are designing, it's because they are maybe doing other things in the project before they give you the commission. After they give you the commission, they hold on, the project gets put on hold for another 2 years because they're raising more money. You know, all those things that are in between can be used to create. And I think it's about, you know, maybe redefining the project line, redefining the way you manage a project that allows more creative time.
But I will also, I will also state that you need to hold on to your conviction at the expense of losing that project. Sometimes we, as architects, fall in love with a project so much we'll do anything just to please the client. It's like I'm me going to a doctor and they're about to surgically do something to me and I tell them, no, you should not cut the left, but cut the right. Oh, cut my head instead of my shoulder, right? But a lot of our clients do that. If they want to cut their head instead of their stomach with a problem when the tumor is in the stomach, you should walk away from it because it will kill them, right? So developers are the same way. I remember the head of tourism. Oh, I'm so sorry, they're developers. But if there are, I remember when Waterhouse was open, to a lot of craziness. It was not just my mother who was shocked. The head of tourism, I still remember, during the opening of the party, walked in the door and looked at me, called Professor Kuo, this project is an embarrassment to the city. This is not finished. And walked back. I still remember, and my client kind of panicked, didn't know what to do because it was a big entourage. The BAS came in, 8 of them came in and walked out. Didn't even eat or the hors d'oeuvres, nothing. Walked in and walked out. And the next 2 weeks, we had some major projects. And literally, he convinced many of them that were working with us on projects in Shanghai to stop. 3 projects. I still remember we had how many people? 15. We were thinking, we're not going to survive this. You know, we're going to end up with maybe 3 or 4. Literally overnight, we lost, in a week, span of a week, we lost 3 major projects, huge projects. 2 years later, David Beckham, the soccer player, decided to book the whole hotel, all 19 rooms, close it with security, and all of a sudden the same tourism head came to my office and goes, you must know something that we do not know. It took a soccer player of all not an art critic or an architectural critic, right? A soccer player, okay, he's good looking, but a soccer player to validate our work. But I knew all along, we knew we were doing something right. We knew that was the right thing to do for the city. They might have a problem with it, and we were ready to go down fighting for every inch of our conviction. That same head of tourism asked us to have photographs of our work because he wants to put it in front of the brochure for Shanghai tourism. In the next 4 years, it was in front of tourism. And that's why Massimo decided to come.
Okay.
Thank you for all thoughtful question, and thank you again, Rossana Hu, for your inspiring talk. Now I invite you all to go to Fiara reception room, where we can continue the conversation and where we can celebrate this wonderful event together. Thank you.